Today with us is Finbarr O'Reilly. In his bio it says he's British Canadian, but I thought that you are Irish. And we are going to talk about his book, Congo in Conversation. And the project, obviously Finbarr will tell us more about it, but the project is a part of, actually it's been awarded let me share the website. It's an award that Finbarr received in 2019. It's 11th Carmignac Photojournalism Award. You make sure to check out the website and the gorgeous book that you can get. Just a few housekeeping rules. This conversation is recording. We are not broadcasting live anymore on Facebook, but those who sign up will receive a link. I hope you will have questions for Finbarr. Make sure to use the Q&A box in Zoom, and I will aggregate questions for Finbarr. Before handing over to Finbarr, I want to share a picture that I think is very important for this book, but in general for Congo. And I think it's famous picture, but it's not as famous as I think it should be. It's a picture by Robert Lebeck, a German photographer, and it's called The Sword Thief, and it's a photo taken on June 29, 1960.
I'm not seeing it on my screen, actually. I'm not sure if other people are. It's coming up a bit. Maybe just try it again.
Let me share it again. Is it sharing now? You see it now?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a famous, but not as famous as it should be, photograph called Sword Thief, where a former soldier is stealing a sword from in what's now Kinshasa, in days of when Congo declared independence, and he stole a sword from a Belgian, what was he, king, prince?
The Belgian king, yeah.
Exactly.
The monarch who was overseeing
the transition.
well, first the colony and then independence, which was the following day.
But the reason why I'm showing this picture, and which I think is a good way to start this conversation, is that it was taken by a foreigner, a German, for that matter. And I think of all the countries in the world, Congo has been largely represented by foreigners. And Finbarr was a Reuters photographer in Africa for, 12 years? So pretty much everything we know about Africa, and in particular Congo, this massive, huge country, incredibly rich, is through the eyes of the foreigners. And I can relate to that because I come from a country that up until recently, up until I took photography, was largely photographed and represented through the eyes of the foreigners. And I would like to start this conversation with Finbarr and hand over the virtual floor to Finbarr. So Finbarr, this was a collaborative project in the fullest sense of that meaning. So can you just guide us through, because the whole project was affected by the pandemic. In a way, the pandemic helped shape this project. So if you could just guide us quickly through how this all happened.
Certainly. First of all, I should really point out that as we're talking about representation and who tells stories, which is a very important element of our conversation today, I should point out that I'm not supposed to be here on my own. Bernadette Vivuya, one of the Congolese visual journalists who participate in the project, is due to join us. She's got some technical issues with internet connection in Goma in Eastern Congo at the moment. So we're hoping she will actually be able to join us at some point during this conversation, because it's very important that when we're talking about how Congo is depicted and the importance of Congolese visual journalists being part of that and instrumental to this project, to have her here. So we're really hoping she will join us. But yes, to get to your question, the way that this works, the Carmignac Foundation is a foundation that every year provides a grant for a photographer or a pair of photographers sometimes to address a big kind of global theme or a theme related to a specific country. So in the past, the subject has been Zimbabwe or Iran or the Arctic. The year before I started my project, it was the Amazon. So it tends to revolve around the environment and human rights. And when they put forward Congo as the subject for last year, I submitted my proposal for what I wanted to do. And my proposal was to look at the country in a context of more than 20 years of conflict and the common themes and narratives that came out of the country, which were around conflict and resource exploitation. And those are themes that I had covered as a photographer working for Reuters, first as actually a journalist, as a text correspondent, starting in 2001. So it's about 20 years that I've been living and working in Congo. And so I was very conscious that, as you mentioned in the opening sequence there, that outsiders, foreigners have really driven the narrative and controlled the narrative around the story of Congo. And it's a resource-rich country that has been exploited right the way back, well, starting with the Belgians, the Belgian colonists, and the wealth that's been extracted there. But that's a theme that's continued even after the end of colonialism and through the last 40, 50 years, 60 years now of independence with gold and timber and diamonds and uranium and any number of minerals that are pouring out of this country, but not to the benefit of the Congolese themselves, to foreign enterprises, and so on. So in a sense, journalism was part of that extractive process. And when I started this project, my plan was to try and find one or two, a Congolese photographer and maybe a Congolese journalist that I could work with. And I was just coming back off the back of another project where I had been commissioned by the Nobel Peace Prize to create an exhibition around the Ethiopian Prime Minister who had been the laureate in 2019. And for that project as well, I knew that there was a very strong photographic community in Ethiopia, and I felt it would be important for them to be included in any exhibition, any important show about the country. And I knew that in the limited time I had to do that project, I could only bring so much as an outsider to that exhibition. So with Ida Moulinet, who's the co-founder the founder of Addis Photo Festival, and a handful of Ethiopian journalists, we created this exhibition where I was the outsider with my perspective inward, and they were the Ethiopian photographers projecting their perspective outward of the country. And so when the pandemic hit and we realized that I was not going to be able to spend the amount of time that the grant normally expects an awardee to spend in the country, which is up to 6 months, with a view to producing a traveling exhibition and a book, the Carmignac team and myself started talking about, well, do we just abandon this completely, or do we find a way to maybe work with Congolese visual journalists and engage them in the storytelling that they have historically been excluded from? And so that's what we decided to do. I contacted some of the journalists and photographers who I knew from my decades of working in the country, and seeing what ideas they had, what things were happening in their communities, in their neighborhoods, because of course we were conscious that with the pandemic, we needed to be careful about health and security risks, security as well, because there is conflict, there are security issues in some parts of Congo as well. So through a process of talking with local journalists in Congo, and then looking through the Africa photojournalism database, making a few more contacts through the Seven network as well, actually, because Seven had done workshops in Kinshasa, I gradually started to build up a rapport with some more photographers than I had initially known there, and we had back and forth about their work. And with the Carmignac team, we decided that it would be possible to launch a platform, an online platform dedicated to publishing their stories throughout the pandemic. And we're still publishing now, not as often as we did during the pandemic, because we've slowed down the pace a little bit, because it's hugely time consuming. And also because I will be going back next week to Congo to pick up. The grant has been rolled over for an additional year to continue publishing. But we were producing the exhibition of the work. We were producing the books, which you see here. It's actually one book, but with two different covers. one that's kind of like more political, one that touches on some of the more kind of social aspects of life during the pandemic in Congo. But really, the idea was to put the storytelling power into the hands of the Congolese visual journalists. Bernadette, who, as I said earlier, hopefully will be joining us, is a filmmaker and video journalist. So her contributions were more in moving images and more on the website than in the book, although she does have some images in the book and in the exhibitions that we've had in France. But that was generally the origins of the project and how it got started.
You mentioned in the book decolonizing camera, and I think it's in the introduction or in the conversation later on. So certainly this project is exactly that. But I'm just curious, are we naive, or to put it mildly, overly optimistic if we think that this process can actually be successful? When by decolonizing camera, I mean decolonizing media and ownership of the narrative. Are we overly optimistic that actually can be successful process? Because
sure.
just to give more details, obviously 30 years ago technology was expensive. It was photography as a medium was much more expensive. It was practically very difficult financially to be a photographer if you're coming from low-income countries. Now with digital, that's not really that much of a burden, but still other issues remain. What we like to call gatekeepers, the way that photographers in, let's say, above the equator see photography aesthetically. We are sort of slaves to this Western canon of how photographs should look like, and so on and so forth. So with all these things, they still remain in place. And I'm just curious if what you are trying to do, and I would say manage to do, does this decolonization is actually wishful thinking? And you froze there for a little bit. You froze. We're gonna wait for a little bit to get Finbarr back online. So it seems not only Congo has problems with internet. Oops. And it seems we are alone here. Everyone, just please give a second for Finbarr to come back online. And while we wait for him, I'll take liberty to show you a little bit of the book before he comes back. So I'm just going to share it here. I hope you're seeing it. So I'll just go quickly through the book while we get Finbarr back online. So this is one of the covers of the book. As you saw, the book comes with two covers, one that is more involved in, let's call it, political situation in Congo, another in more of a daily life. I'll just go quickly through this. Just when I started to sing praises to technology, this is what technology did to us. In the meantime, while we are waiting, feel free to ask any questions. We already started getting questions in the Q&A box. So, and we'll convey those questions to Finbarr, and hopefully he'll get a chance to reply to it. So suddenly I lost both of my guests. This is the image that is alternative cover. Okay, Finbarr is back. Hi, Finbarr. While you were away, I was sharing a little bit of PDF. That's okay. So I'll just stop sharing. Okay, Finbarr is back. So yes, just as I was singing praises to the Just as I was singing praises to how technology made everything better, we lost you. Anyway, so this is my point. So that was my question. Just to repeat it, is this what we are wishing for? Is this decolonization and democratization of lens, camera, media, is wishful thinking, or it's something that we can hope for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an ideal when you have, you know, generations, like the entire history of photography basically has been dominated by a certain subset of people who dominate in other parts of society and globally as well.
You can say white men.
Yeah, certainly. People from our identity group. So you know, that's absolutely true, and that's what we were trying to redress in this. And that's like saying, you know, I would say, yeah, it's an ideal. We need to be working toward it. We need to be moving toward it. We need to be making it happen. And you know, the goal of world peace is virtually unobtainable, but that doesn't mean that we don't strive to broker peace deals. We don't strive to create more peaceful societies and more progressive societies. So certainly the challenges are huge. The obstacles are huge. There are people in these gatekeeping positions who aren't interested in you know, leveling the battlefield or rebalancing the inequities and inequalities that have existed as long as photography has. So, you know, I think it's a matter of people in these positions of influence and of power, and who have the opportunities that we have to open the door to groups of photographers who haven't had the same advantages as we have. And certainly, yes, the ideal situation isn't that I'm the one necessarily sharing this award with Congolese photographers, but rather that a Congolese photographer or a photographer from the next country that will be chosen for the Carmignac Award gets that grant and is in control of that. But we do see that happening. For example, you know, when I collaborated with Ida Moulinet to do the Nobel Peace Prize exhibition, she was the first Black African woman to be involved with the Nobel the exhibitions. She was then commissioned the following year, this year, to do the whole exhibition herself. So, you know, there can be a progression, there can be improvements in balancing this this long-standing exclusion of these we call other voices. They are not other voices, they are voices that have been intentionally excluded.
And I don't think it's only about access to jobs, so to speak, but I think Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and so on, as much as they are fighting oppression in various shapes and forms, racism, sexism, and so on, I think they're also about the question of who owns the narrative. And I guess this book is also about changing the ownership of the narrative. And there's one, I think it's, for me, it's really important that it's Congo. I mean, this project in this form, in this collaborative form, could have been done like you've done it in Ethiopia, could have been done in a number of countries. But I think it's really, Congo is really this place, a country where we can see the dark side. And I'm going to quote this from it's a very last paragraph in the conversation he had in the book. And it says, yes, it's one of the key things. It's one of the key things around European history, the dark side of modernity, the dark side of the Enlightenment, and I would add also Industrial Revolution for that matter. And that's why that's what I mean by the kind of honesty around what we went on, the genocidal nature of European development and colonial invasion. I think that's why it's so important that this book is coming from Congo and not some other country. Would you mind sharing some of the content? I briefly shared the PDF, but I think it would be better if you guide us through a little bit. And while you do that, I will also start browsing through the questions. So, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just hit my share screen and I'll go to, let me first show the book itself, the physical. I held it up earlier, but I will just I'll just go through and show some images of what the book actually looks like as full screen. So that's the full cover. one of the full covers, and that's a photograph by Raisa Rizibuka, who's 22, I think, or maybe she's 23 now, year-old photographer based in Bukavu in the east of the country. And we can look at some of more of her work and what this image comes from in her series a bit later. But this is the other cover, which is a little bit more political, by Moses Sawasawa, of protests in Goma, which were politically linked, but also kind of connected loosely to the pandemic. So those are some of what the cover looks like. Inside, you have some of the issues around the conflict in the northeast of the country. These are photographs taken by Dieudonné Dirol, who's based in Bunia in the Ituri region, as well as a photograph here by Justin Makangara in Kinshasa of political events. So there's a lot of stuff that's related to politics and insecurity. There are texts that accompany the work, as well as, of course, the credits for the photographers. A lot revolves around the conflict, of course, because that's a defining part of life for many people, but there's also a lot more nuance than just conflict. So we looked at issues around electricity and power supply in the country, more protests, and of course, not just the pandemic that Congo was dealing with, but one of the worst measles outbreaks in the world, as well as the end of an Ebola epidemic, which was the second deadliest Ebola epidemic in history. So these are some of the page layouts, more pictures from Raisa, just to give you a sense of what the book looks like. Of course, images from markets and so on. This is after lockdown was started in March of last year, but because Congo is a country where most people are living on very narrow margins of $1 or $2 a day, don't have access to electricity. It's not like people can go and buy 2 weeks of supply and put it in a fridge and then stay at home. People have to go and buy and sell at the market to survive, to eat. So those are what the book actually looks like. So this is some of the work from the book. These are Bernadette's pictures. I wish she was here to talk about them. Unfortunately, she hasn't been able to connect yet. But a lot of what we're looking at is the daily lives of the photographers in their immediate environments. These were kids who were out of school, and they were using bits of old car ball bearings to play billiards on the street. And so this is again from the conflict in these are a closer look at Dieudonné's pictures from the conflict in Ituri, which is ongoing.
May I jump in with questions while you?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
While you browse through the pictures. So Marianne Sievers, if I'm pronouncing badly, I apologize, is asking, and I'm just going to read the question. Besides from all ideals of decolonizing photography in Congo, how do you deal with / reflect during being out and photographing, I assume in Congo, that the fact that you are a white European male person?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is the most important question around how this is managed. The reality of the situation is that, when we're talking about photographers who have traditionally been excluded, like the photographers here in Congo, the problem is that they don't have the resources or the platform to reach the global audience. And what I realized is through the financing and the resources of the Carmignac Foundation, they were able to provide that. And so I'm really the conduit, in a way, for the Congolese photographers through our collaboration to have their work shared and shown to the international audience. And this is really important, because the reason we titled the project Congo in Conversation is because it really was a conversation. And these ideas, these stories were coming from the photographers themselves. They would WhatsApp me, we would talk on the phone. They would, this is a picture, for example, by Arlette Bashizi, who is a photographer based in Goma, and it's a picture of her little sister studying at home when school was closed during another power cut in the city, which is very common. So this is her reality, and this is a kind of picture that, okay, maybe I could get it, but this is not my reality. This is a reflection of Arlette's life, the life of her family, the life of her community, and the reality for many Congolese. So in a way, on a project like this, my role is to facilitate, because I have the privilege of the Carmignac Award, which was given to me, as are many of these things, as we said at the outset, to the foreign photographers, to the white male photographers. But it's in choosing to use that award and that platform to do a couple of things. Not only provide the platform to these Congolese photographers, but also for a wider international audience to see the depth of talent that exists in the country that is otherwise being overlooked and that is otherwise not being recognized. And the amount of attention that these photographers has got, they're getting commissions now from news agencies, from NGOs. A number of them have been on educational training programs with Canon and with the Seven Academy as well. All of these lead to opportunities. So this is one of the things that strikes me as well is when we're doing a lot of the media around this in France. One question or one comment that often came up from people was that, oh, isn't this a nice gift that you've given to the Congolese photographers? And I think that's really not the way to look at it at all. This is not charity. This is not. This is Congolese photographers asserting their right to assume the central role of storytelling from their own country. And really, I do genuinely feel like this is as creatively stimulating and invigorating for me as a photographer as if I were creating my own work. This is more rewarding. This is more satisfying to see the quality of this work coming out from Congo, knowing that this deep talent pool there exists. As I've seen, there's a very vibrant media in Congo, but it often doesn't travel beyond the country's borders. And really what the Carmignac project here did was elevate that work to a wider international audience. Because you or I or any other outside photographer can go there, but it ends up being, to a degree, it ends up being parachute journalism, even for me who's been working in Congo off and on for 20 years and have spent 2 years living there. What the pictures that I get are going to be very different from what these Congolese photographers are producing. And so once they send their images in, when I'm working on them with the text, it really is a back and forth. And we don't publish anything on the site or in the book without the Congolese photographers reading through the texts and making any amendments, any changes that they feel are important or that represent their perspectives. So it is all about their voice and their words and their images. And what I bring to it is more as a curatorial role in terms of the years of experience I have as a photographer, as an editor, and working with them. Every photographer, you and I, we all need somebody else to look at our work and help us choose images and pull them into a narrative. And so that was my role, as we say, as the white male foreigner in this. And it's a collaborative work that ultimately the idea is it benefits everybody. It benefits me, who was tasked with producing a project. It benefits the photographers in Congo who now have an international platform. And it benefits the Carmignac Foundation because they have been doing something that is very socially valuable at any time, but particularly at a time when we see greater calls for racial justice and for a shift in the way that stories are told from certain communities.
So there's a question from Amber. Do you think this project will lead to more and more regular work for Congolese photographers who are co-authors of the book, or that already happened?
Yeah, it's already happening. It's already happening. A number of them have commissions from NGOs, such as Catholic Relief Services, Doctors Without Borders. I think one is now doing some stuff for UNICEF, perhaps. But yeah, and one has signed with Getty as a freelance contributor. Another is on trial with Reuters news agency now as well. So all of them are engaged not only with our project. Of course, the work that we publish of theirs, they're paid on standard international rates. But when their work is then seen on our platforms and published by international media outlets, they're also paid again by those outlets for publication. So yes, they're compensated, of course, for the work they do for Carmignac, but then they are finding additional work from the exposure that they've had. And some are selling prints because some of the images in the exhibitions have attracted the attention of those who see the exhibitions on the streets in Paris or elsewhere.
And I'm gonna just go with questions as they're coming in.
Yeah, please. I'm just going to keep going through the pictures.
Yeah, Maciej is asking, what was the hardest thing in this remote team project? And then it continues, if I understood well, Finbarr give others free hand to work, but in the same time had to choose and edit presented series. So yeah, what was the hardest thing in the remote and team nature of the project?
I think it's very time consuming project like this. There's a lot of resources that go into it, human resources, in the sense that the Carmignac has an entire team. It's not just me. There's translators, there's fact checkers, because of course all of the work is published in French and in English on the site and in the book. So you've got, and because the Carmignac Foundation has to be very strict about fact checking, making sure everything is, really, verified from multiple sources, or citing sources. So there's a huge amount of work that goes into producing a project of this magnitude and this professionalism. Also, for me as the curator, I'm in contact with 12 different photographers, often by WhatsApp, and bouncing ideas back and forth. So I'll be getting messages at all times of day and night, and evenings and weekends. Although we're not publishing as a news outlet, there was a fairly steady and constant roll of demands on my time and back and forth. And then some of the photographers are quite early in their career, so for them to get onto training programs with educational programs with Seven and with Canon to learn some of the finer points around the photojournalism business for things such as captioning and that sort of thing. Those were some of the things, back and forth on the captioning, and then ensuring that everyone was happy with the texts that were accompanying their images. So it really was a conversation. There's a lot of back and forth. So every time we publish something online, there has been, maybe 20 or 30 hours of work, possibly more, put into it after the photographs have been taken. So these are the kind of logistical things that aren't super interesting, perhaps, but that's the work involved.
And again, a question from Maciej, but I'm actually also interested in that. He's saying presented series are very coherent in terms of visual language, aesthetics, and post-production. So can you tell a little bit more about the workflow that you have to make it so coherent? In particularly, I would say post-production wise, it's very uniform and consistent.
Yeah, so this was something that I had to think about from the outset, because I really did want the voice of each individual photographer and the style of each individual photographer to come through. But I did want a sense of continuity through the overall aesthetic. And whether this was done correctly or not, I did put my imprint a little bit on this, in terms of, I was the one who asked, they were welcome, the photographers were welcome to send in images the way they wanted to, but a lot of times I would just ask them to send the raw images, and then I would do some basic post-production in Lightroom or Photoshop, just to get things looking the way that I wanted to. Partly because some of the photographers don't have Lightroom or Photoshop available to them, or their screens aren't as well calibrated for the color. So I kind of handled the post-production, and for the most part, Justin Makangara in Kinshasa did most of his own himself, because he was shooting in black and white a lot of the time, or converting to black and white. And so, you know, he's been doing this for a lot longer. Some of the ones in Eastern Congo are fairly early on in their careers, so they are also just finding their aesthetic voices as well. And so that was kind of an imprint maybe that I had, or an influence that I had on the aesthetic of the project. So if people have issues with that, they can certainly, you know, critique me, but I wouldn't critique the photographers.
Something entirely off, in a way, different question. John Leder is asking, how does one buy a print?
Yeah, so we don't have a streamlined process for this, but if there's a particular image that resonates with a viewer, they can contact me and I will put it to the photographer, and we can find a way. I have a print shop that I run for my own stuff, and I can, with the permission of the photographer and an agreement on a rate, then we could arrange something to be done.
There you hear, Joanna. So this is a very interesting question from Ted Ostrovsky. So I'm just going to read it. Here in Canada, cultural appropriation is a hot button topic. Generally, the sense is that if you are not from the culture, then you are ill-equipped to be the storyteller. Even more so if you are viewed as colonizer. My belief is that we are all of the same family and have the right and responsibility to tell stories with respect and honorably. So who owns the narrative? Does it only belong to those turning the camera on themselves? You want to say something on that?
Sure, I can. I mean, I suppose I would answer, you know, who has owned the narrative up until now? It's outsiders, it's us, as we've said from the beginning of this conversation. And so, you know, my feeling is that there's room for people to come from outside and tell stories, but not at the cost of hearing the voices from inside and the perspectives from inside the communities, whatever communities, whether it's Congo, whether it's a community in Canada. But you know, there's a big controversy right now because a CNN journalist flew into Myanmar to cover the coup there, and this has created a huge stir because, you know, was saying that I'm the first international journalist in, and the feeling is that they put a lot of local activists and journalists at risk, the way that they operated and controlled that narrative. So I think there's always room for both, but the problem is there historically in Congo anyway has only been one group controlling the narrative. So this project is really about trying to shift that dynamic. And I'm really sorry that Bernadette wasn't able to get online to join us today, because I would have loved for everybody to have heard from her, because rather than me just saying all this stuff, because it's far more interesting what Bernadette has to say from her perspective. So I do apologize for that, for not having her here. I'm assuming it was an internet connectivity issue on her end, but really, sure, nobody owns anything. But you know, we do need to think about the importance of voices from the communities having control over how they are represented, how their stories are told and shown, and for it not to be extractive or exploitative.
And I would just add that this question is maybe more suitable to what we refer to as gatekeepers, because at the end of the day, it is them that decide what gets out there and what not. So, but yes, I agree with what you just said. And okay, so there is another question. There are many questions. So it's a practical question from Anna, and she's asking, do you and other foreign photographers you see or know also engage in these conversations on the ground with the population, adults or kids, or do they engage with you and question your presence and approach? And if so, what do these conversations look like? Are they, yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, so I do have these conversations with other foreign photographers, and people from our identity group, white male photographers who have traditionally worked in countries in Africa. This is an ongoing re-examination of our roles. What are our roles going forward? I think some of us now are realizing that we need to be doing more. I certainly, as further I move along in my career, I've worked a certain amount in certain environments, and now with the projects that I've been doing for the last while, I see my role much more in developing the next generation of storytellers, and sharing the knowledge and experience that I've gained, the way that people before me shared their knowledge and experience with me as I was coming up, and being part of that older generation now, sharing those skills, transferring those skills, and to a broader network of emerging photographers. When I'm in Congo having these conversations with my Congolese colleagues, the journalists that I collaborated with on this project, for example, we do talk about this. And Bernadette, again, I wish she was here, because she did she's a filmmaker. She did an amazing film on this very subject called Stop Shooting Us, which was a story about a documentary film about foreign photographers coming to photograph in Eastern Congo, and what it meant to members of the Congolese media in that area. And it was people sitting around debating who should be telling these stories, what kind of stories get told, why is it always the same kind of stories that leave and go outside. So yeah, these are very important and current conversations that are happening, and they are ones that I'm having with my colleagues around the world now.
So you said that the project, that Carmignac extended the project. Well, I mean, extended, I guess, support to project. So I'm just curious, where is it going next?
Yeah, me too. The idea is, originally the grant was for me to produce a book and an exhibition of my work. The idea that I had was to find a way to do something collaborative. That was accelerated by the pandemic. And now with another year of the grant, but still strange COVID times for travel, we're still publishing about once a month online. We don't know what exhibition opportunity is going to be like as things start to open up again. But we'll confirm a little bit later in the year whether we'll be doing a second book. But the idea is I go back on Monday to Congo for about a month, and I will be shooting some of the stories that I had originally planned. And I think also I would like to work with some of the photographers that I collaborated with, because a couple of them have suggested to me stories that I was thinking of doing. But I thought, now, wouldn't it be interesting really to work on these stories together, not in the dynamic of a foreign photographer and a fixer, but as two photographers going and shooting these stories in our own individual ways, and seeing how our perspectives differ, and maybe aligning those in an exhibition or in a book at some point, and really seeing and teasing out those different perspectives in a way that, on a page or in an exhibition. Here's how Gershom saw this scene. Here's how Finbarr saw it, and really have a look at what similarities align and what differs. And then I'm also looking at some archives as well, and how some of that might be drawn into the project. It's not entirely clear yet, but it's a work in progress. But it will be further conversations on the ground with our collaborators, and seeing what we can create. But we will also be bringing the Congo exhibition now to the Congo Biennale in Kinshasa in September. We're in the process of organizing that. So the exhibition that was in Paris in January, or some version of it, should be in Kinshasa for Congolese to see. I think it's really important for the work to appear in the country of origin by the photographer, accompanied by the photographers who did the work. So those are all elements that we're working on. But in these pandemic times, it's very difficult to nail things down exactly. But that's kind of the direction that we're looking and we'll see where everything stands. If you'd asked me this time last year where things were going to go, I wouldn't have been able to answer you, or at least been able to tell you the way things have worked out. So we will see, but it'll be really interesting to get to wherever we're going.
I think we have one. I think we have time for one more question and I think it brings us back to what we mentioned earlier. It's a question from Don, and he's asking, could you speak about what needs to happen next, in the sense that while there is a lot of work to do in order to get marginalized storytellers in front of the people, how far do you think we are from getting marginalized people having some of those gatekeeper roles at foundations, publications that seem very important as well?
Yeah, I mean, these changes have to happen across the industry, at the level of, not just photographers, but the gatekeepers, the editors, the senior editors, the managers of media outlets, curators at institutions. But this is a long, slow rolling process, and these are institutional kind of issues that will be take a long time to I suppose revolutionize would be the right word, because things have been stuck at a status quo for a long time. But we're talking about these things now. That's a start. It's never going to be enough, but little by little we're seeing changes. We're seeing, if you look at for example, the roster of photographers being commissioned by the New York Times over the last 5 years has changed significantly. From a small collection of photographers to a much broader, geographically, racially diverse group of photographers. And I think the result speaks for itself. The work is amazing, and oftentimes, and having people from if not the country being reported on, but at least the continent, whether it's Asia, whether it's Africa, whether it's Latin America, Central America, or specific communities within the US. These are providing very different perspectives and important perspectives that are really, challenging, I think, in many ways, what we see. There's a lot more to be done, of course, at every level of the institution of photojournalism.